We get to hear from some amazing people today, and I want to introduce them for you. So are you ready to learn how to lead at an executive level? We've got our executive pastor of local ministries and creative. He is also my boss, and he's amazing. He's going to be here sharing his wisdom. We've got executive pastor Chris Book. He also oversees our global ministries and our operations, which is vital, and I'm so thankful for you. And then we have our chief financial officer, Steve Chaney, and he's the GOAT. Steve, we love you. Have an amazing session. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end, and so I'll be back up here to help organize that. But take it away, guys. Have a blast.
Check 1, 2. Everybody feeling good? I first want to say a huge thanks to Dara Lee. She serves as an associate in what we call local. It's really the ministry side and the campuses side of our church. And Dara Lee, you make us better. So thanks for the introduction, and I appreciate it. Make some noise for a great breakout moderator. It's awesome. Hey, she introduced us and gave titles which may make little sense to you, or maybe it does make sense, but it'd be beneficial to kind of break out a little bit more what each of us look after and do, just to kind of set up the conversation. So, Pastor Chris, I don't know if you want to share first what you're responsible for.
Yeah, I've been on staff here for about 9 years now. Be 9 years in October. My role has definitely evolved. All of our role, well, not yours. You've always just been the CFO, but mine and the
just money. The CFO.
Just the CFO. No, I oversee two main areas. Anything that's forward-facing in the church, KB, global projects, anything missional, the network, those are the teams I work with, and then anything operational. So that would include HR, IT, finance. I work directly with Steve.
Infrastructure.
Our whole infrastructure, taking care of buildings, building new buildings, all those things. Those are the teams that I work with primarily.
Yeah, amazing.
Yes, thank you. And I started in, July of 2019, right before COVID, and became the CFO in January of 2020. And I've been doing, we have a couple staff people here, and my staff actually run it. If you don't know this, I'm their virtual CFO. I actually do this all from Sacramento, California area. We run all the accounting from there. We have one phenomenal accountant here on staff, and Carla Holquist. And then I work with the team.
Where's Carla? Is she here?
I don't see her. And she's amazing. And with the team, with Chris and with Kirk. And then, but it's been great. So we'll get more into it. Yep.
If you didn't know, Chaney Associates, his company helps serve over 2,000 churches all around the country, around the world, and just an amazing asset to our church, but thousands of churches. And so it's a privilege just to be able to do ministry with both these guys. I've had the privilege of being on staff for 13 and a half years, serving in multiple different capacities over time. Just my wife and I, who's in the back, hi Kaylee, love you. We've always said as long as God has us here, we're just going to say yes to whatever Pastor Rob asks us to do. And so started as a worship leader, served in young adults, as a campus pastor at a couple different of our campuses, and then serving as an executive pastor. What local means to us is kind of the campus side of things, looking after some of our great campus pastors are in the room, Pastor Davey, Pastor Anthony, there may be more, love you guys. So looking after campus pastors as well as our ministry divisions, which breaks down to creative, next gen, and discipleship. And within each of those divisions, there's departments. And so that's kind of the scale of what we get to do and what we get to look after. And it's been the adventure of a lifetime. And this session is just explaining not just what we do, but how we interact with each other, as well as how we interact with Pastor Rob, and how we are greatly empowered by him while he is doing what he was made to do, kind of apostolically and globally. The heartbeat of our church, our heart is global. And so a lot of what he does is out and about around the world, helping champion missionaries and help train other churches to live just with a global framework. And maybe people here have been to a generosity accelerator that he's led. Anybody been to a generosity accelerator? Okay, a couple people, awesome. Just would highly, highly encourage that. And while he's out doing that, we have the privilege to help steward and champion his vision, which hopefully is God's vision for this church. And so it's amazing. We do have just a little bit of information about, in greater detail, how the church is organized. And I don't know if you kind of want to explain. There's a chart, kind of talk it through.
Nico, can you go through those charts? So this is what we call our org design, maybe not our org chart, where you can see, I mean, obviously what we just talked about, how the three of us work with each other, report directly to Pastor Rob. Steve here works directly on my team, but has a dotted line to Pastor Rob. And we're also joking, I mean, there might as well just be a dotted line over to Pastor Kirk as well. I mean, it's the three of us, we're just talking so often on such a regular basis. So that's slide one. Go to the next one, and this is going to break out a little bit more, just the specific areas oversee. Go to the next one, next one, next one. Okay, there we go.
Hey, you guys got all that? Good.
Well,
yeah, great.
It's just they're each building on each other. You guys are quick. This is the executive session, right? No, so this is just going to show you. I hate looking back like that. This is just going to show you really the org chart now, different people we oversee. If you look at Kirk's area it's probably 80, we have about 160 employees on the team. This would represent probably 100-ish of our employees, and teams I oversee probably about 50-ish. You know, the operations team, those kinds of teams are always going to be smaller, going to be a little more, we have to be smaller and efficient so we can actually fund more of what's actually happening on the ministry side. So if you're just wondering how that actually breaks down, the other thing I'd like to say is on the lead team, and we'll get into kind of above the line, below the line stuff here in just a couple minutes, but the lead team, this is who really runs the church. This is who's getting everything done. So Pastor Rob has entrusted his vision to Kirk, to Steve, and myself, but what we do then is we try and push leadership as far down in the organization as possible. We trip, we have feet of clay just like everybody else, and we might empower someone, but then we want to take that back a little bit, and that's something that, you know, it's the gravitational pull in organizational life is to try and make decisions. And so, but what we try and do is really put that down to the lead team, and they are the ones running the day-to-day. They're the ones running everything. So if it's like, I have a question about if you have a specific HR question, I'm going to help you connect to Danette Anderson, because I'm not going to have all of those salient details kind of thing. Like, we really want this team, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people who are really going to run the church for us. So in a nutshell, that's how we're organized. And the second thing I'd say, probably the last thing about this, as you're thinking about your executive team at your church, and, you know, depending on how you're organized, how your lead pastor is wired, all those things. Like, you just have to get the actual org chart right. The org design has to be right. You could have a lead pastor that they love coming up with the strategy. They love coming up with the ideas. They love doing all this. Well, your org charts are going to look a little bit different than this. You're going to have different kinds of people filling those roles. You're going to have more executors as opposed to the people that can dream, the people that can strategize, the people that can do all that. These are the people that dream and strategize. These are the people that can hear Pastor Rob's vision, and they can hear it through us, and then they just take that on. They own it. There's people that have their own vision. There's people that can do other people's vision, but then there's this middle group of people who can actually take on someone else's vision so much that it becomes their own, and it becomes an outflow of who they are. And those are the kind of people that we try and have on the lead team. So it's not them trying to run their own play. It's not them trying to take things their own way, but to really internalize everything and move forward.
It's amazing. One thing that we talk about, especially on the operations side, is above the line responsibilities and below the line responsibilities. Another way to say it would be kind of high level view, future thinking. Where are we going? What's the vision for this specific area? Below the line would be like in the weeds, hands on, in the details, and really at an executive level, it requires the skill to be able to play in both worlds. Depending on what's needed in the season of the church. And so you try to stay as high level as possible and above the line, empowering and it can't be overstated, incredible campus pastors and department leads and divisional leaders and lead campus pastors. And for your church, it would be the same way. Who your kids pastor is, who your young adult pastor, whatever your staff looks like, the ones that are leading the ministry, allow them to do that. The way that we allow them to do that is staying above the line. And so thinking 3 years down the road or 5 years down the road, or just the higher level decisions that only we're empowered to make, and only making those decisions, allowing for campus pastors, department heads to make the decisions that they're empowered to make for their area. And so we'd love to just kind of talk through some examples. Steve, do you have examples of what does above the line mean to you, and what is below the line, and kind of how do you play in both worlds at times?
Yeah, well, it was interesting when I first came in here, and we're just being open a little bit here. When I first came in here, the budgeting process was really just out of whack. We had transitioned from a fiscal year, or from calendar year to a fiscal year.
We didn't have much of one.
That's true, and so I'm trying to be nice about it. But and then I found out, like, they were telling, like, the prior leadership, who's not here anymore, was telling me to sort of adjust this and adjust that. So I just sort of had to step back for a second and say, what was it, like, the above the line example here is, well, Pastor Rob talks about that we give 10% of tithes and offerings we give that away. It's called our global projects. So when, let's just say $1 million of tithes comes in, 100,000 is going to leave this organization, and we're not going to touch it. That's something that is the highest level.
And that goes to support missionaries.
That goes to support missionaries.
First 10%. Always.
And so, just starting from that highest level of what is the vision of the leader about the budget. And then some of those, I'm a good listener in this regard. I like to listen a lot to the leader, and then go back and ponder it and say, well, what's the Spirit of God speaking about that to me? Or what was he speaking that to the leader? And then how do I interpret that? And then how can I function through in the feature set and in my skills? So I just went back and I just started putting stuff together, and I'd be like, okay, this is a 2-year budget. That's not a 1-year budget. Or this is a 5-year budget, right? And we started to come up with strategies out of this. We wanted to have a reserve. We wanted to have a $2.5 million reserve, a $3.5 million reserve, and a $5 million reserve. And it was going to grow out of that. And so that was sort of like above the line stuff, right? To say, like, how are we going to come up with this stuff? And usually some people will be like, a goal is we want to be debt free. But, like, how do you become debt free, right? And all this stuff. So that's the kind of stuff. So what I said was, we were going to do like a $2.5 million reserve, and let's just celebrate when we get there. And then let's take a little bit of time, and then we'll kick it up to 3.5 and celebrate a little bit. And then we go to 5. And we'll get into more of this in the conversation. But that's kind of...
Steve helped us celebrate $5 million in reserve pretty quickly. It was
it was amazing. It was all of a sudden we went from here to there. And there's a reason for that, too, because of how great this organization is. But
COVID didn't hurt.
COVID didn't hurt. And so...
also, we have a lead pastor that says, let's leave $0 for the Antichrist. So he's not like a huge reserves guy. Yeah, right. So Steve helping lead up,
Well, you guys heard, he has 1 million ideas a week, right? So it's like, that's what's great about him. So, and then down below that, though, the accounting staff in my office and also in River Valley, the thing, and then all the people, the lead team, and we used to call it different things back in those days. But we started to put in place the tactical things about how to give people the tools to utilize to then be below the line. Like, they're the ones in the trenches. They're the ones who have to know. And I call it the 4 R's, getting the right information to the right person at the right time to make the right decision. And if you just don't have that in place, you can't expect people to make right decisions. And that's what was happening before I had the opportunity to join this organization. This is a great organization, but people just didn't have the right information at the right time to make the right decision, right? And then it was the wrong people getting the wrong information. It was all over the board. So we just fixed all that. And that's what I was brought in for. And then we let the people just run. It wasn't anything secret sauce I brought in. It was what everybody was doing together, right? And they were unified. So that's a little bit how I applied the above and the below the line.
Yeah, if I could sum up the way I think you've done it over the last number of years is Steve comes up with the strategy, and then our team actually implements the tactics of the strategy, and that's been a really helpful. It's been a helpful model for me, helpful thing for me to see. Because when I think of, like in my area specifically, when I think of above the line, below the line, it's the old Craig Rochelle teaching, right? If you want to develop good followers, delegate tasks. If you want to develop good leaders, delegate responsibility. And so it'd be very easy for me to, I'll just go back to HR. It'd be very easy for me to say, hey, I'd like you to do this and this and this with benefits this year, and this and this and this with this. It's the difference of if you have and you know what kind of leader, what kind of lead team you have and what kind you're working with, I think with this little filter. If you have a problem, let's just go to small groups real quick. If you have a problem in your small groups program, do you have to go to your small groups person and say, hey, here's a problem, here are the 3 solutions, here's what I think we should do, now you pick it? That would be delegating the responsibility or the task, right? Or did they come to you say, I have a small groups problem, here are the potential solutions, here's the one I think we should do, boss, is there anything you want to weigh in on? That would be delegating the responsibility. Now, you can't always do that with all of your team members either. Our job is, Kirk and I specifically, our job is to create leaders in our organization, because everything rises and falls in leadership. We all know all the leadership aphorisms, but our job is to do that. And if we take leaders before their time and give them too much responsibility, it could crash. But also, if we speak too much into what they do, they get bored, they think about moving on. So it's just, as an executive team, it's this constant tension you have to manage of, is this person ready for the big decisions? And I think overwhelmingly, yes, our team is ready for that. But it took a while to get there. It took this is what you see on the screen. If it's still not what you saw up on the screen, that was probably the 5th or 6th iteration of our org chart since I've been here in 9 years.
And it's updated from here too. I didn't want to point that out. Things are always shifting and changing. We now have lead campus pastors that help oversee. We have 11 campuses plus Vancouver and East Watini. And Terry Parkman is out of Next Gen doing that. We elevated our kids and youth. So there are iterations, but I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just saying.
So really, that's
take a picture of
out of
this.
date.
It's not true. So yeah.
No, that's all I was gonna comment.
Yeah, and I would. I think we would all agree as well. Developing a great leader is figuring out how to delegate authority. So it's more than just a task, and then more than just responsibility, but also saying that is your call. That's your decision. You get to do that. And as an executive leader, if I truly believe maybe the Lord's leading us a different direction, or that's a misrepresentation of what is in Pastor Rob's heart, or I just firmly think that that's the wrong direction, then maybe I would step in. But how much can you say to the leader, hey, that's your call. That's why you have the job. Like, that's why you're the youth pastor. That's why you're the worship pastor. That's why you're here. You're not just for a task or just for responsibility, but also you get to make that call. And I think we're all trying to do that the best we can. And I'd say this about just specifically below the line for me. My below the line, getting into the weeds primarily, as I think about it, is when we have a leader step out of their role and we don't have the right next leader. And that's a great opportunity to, like, well, am I getting a pay raise for this? Or is this going to be added to my job description because I'm going to carry this for 6 months? I've seen Pastor Chris carry huge chunks of the organization while we were missing certain leaders because they were either let go or they stepped out or God moved them on or they were sent to the mission field. And as an executive leader and just a high-level leader, no matter who you are in the room, there are times that God calls you up to the task of carrying more than what's on your job description. And technically it is in your job description because you oversee it. And so I view it as a joy for me. We had a leader that helped oversee what we called experience, which was separate from worship and production. An amazing leader. God called him to another church and sent and blessed, and that was all good. And it was this time to actually combine experience and worship and production to now a greater creative, unified creative department. And for a season, I had the opportunity to start doing one-on-ones and getting to know all of our central creative team, many that I didn't have close personal relationship with up until that point. So it's like a great value to get below the line at times, not to go like, I'm Mr. Executive, like don't talk to me, or my doors are always open, but nobody ever walks through it because you're intimidating or whatever it is. It's a great opportunity to get to know leaders in the organization that don't necessarily directly report to you, while you allow God the time to show you who's the right leader to take that leadership position. So task, responsibility, and authority. That kind of leads us into this next topic of how do you stay ahead of the vision? I think part of our job is not just championing what is in Pastor Rob's heart, but you have to have, at least in our world, you have to have this sense of like, I'm not sure, but I think this is something that's on his heart. I've heard whispers of this. He said this at one meeting, and I got it through the grapevine, and now there's an area that I oversee that I have to prepare for that. Steve, you've got some great examples of how you've helped us prepare financially for the maybes or the what ifs, and it's really staying ahead of the vision.
Yeah, so a lot of what I do in the meetings is I do a lot of listening to just hear what those ideas are that are coming out. And so that when certain events happen, we have a reserve set aside for it. Because I typically know, like what Pastor Rob was talking about, if he says it one time, it might be an idea. Second time, hey, we're warming up to this. Third time, it's probably on. Fourth time, we're a go. Something like that.
Fourth time, it should have been done yesterday.
Yeah, it should have been done.
Yeah.
And so I've actually got sort of a nickname around here at the leadership level, sort of the king of the reserve. And so I'm like reserving money all the time for these designated projects. And I put them aside. And I'm a very much of a geek-oriented person in accounting. That's just sort of my bent. And so what I think is people in their anointing, in their calling, speak high vision levels. And then in mine, I say, well, how does that interpret? How do we get that into actual dollars? And then we can do stuff like we buy City Campus, or we buy Maple Grove, or we do certain things like this, but we're all setting aside those monies. So you probably heard Dave Ramsey say, like, name every dollar, things of this sort. Well, that's what we sort of do here. We name every dollar. And could you imagine, like, with our budgeting system, like we've built it all out where we're really almost never over budget. If we are, it's intentional because of things that we spoke about. And so our system is all in place to do this, to have absolute controls. And then as those funds come in and I start to hear of things, I start to reserve for it. And then so when people say like, oh, we need to buy all this equipment and everything, oh, that's fine. We already have all this money set aside. And they're like, wait, what? Like, yeah, I've been taking it out of your budget this entire year. And so you didn't know this, and I've been setting it aside. Because we want to be debt-free, right? We don't want to continually get leases. We don't want to get projects and that we have to go borrow money. We want to pay cash. And that's the way you do it. You just got to get ahead of it. So what I'm anointed to do and what God's gifted me to do is be able to forecast that and see that clearly. Like a very complicated project, I don't have to think about it much. I can put it together quickly in my head. And then make it flow through the organization. So that's the kind of stuff I get to do all the time. It's fun.
It actually is amazing and super freeing to the organization when it's like, the money's there. We have the money to do that. And sometimes the leader goes, I actually figured out a different way to do that initiative, or we found a different, cheaper option. And now the margin that Steve was stashing, and I think of it as more of a mafia mentality. Steve, okay. You're like, you gotta, he's like, don't worry, I got you. And it's like, yeah! Woo! But when a leader goes, I found a different way to do it, that stewards the finance better, all of a sudden what was being reserved or saved can be used for something else. And that's what you want a CFO to be doing, which is amazing. Chris, how about you? Just ways to steward and stay ahead of Pastor Rob's vision.
Yeah, I think a huge part of what I have to do is it's what Steve said. You're just sitting there listening. You're asking more leading questions. You're trying to pull out what's in him. Like, hey, I have heard this a couple times. Is this something you really want to do? Half the times it's, no. Or half the times it's, yeah, I was pretty clear about that. Okay. Sorry, Nico. Okay, we're going to get on that for you then. So it is just listening, pulling out of it, but it's also helping us realize, and this is any organization at any size, when you're in the flow and when your mission and your resources and your vision, your strategy, when those are all aligned and you're really moving forward, you kind of get this thought like, we can do anything. We can do anything we put our minds to. And you can, but you just can't do everything. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. And so I feel like part of my role is to be the guy to say, we can't do everything. And here are the trade-offs. If we want to do that, here's the plan. Here's how we would do that. But if we want to do that, here are some potential things we have to think about not doing, not being able to fund, not being able to go and purchase or whatever it might be. And in a high vision, in a high production, in a vision that, or an environment that's just go all the time, that's not fun. It's not fun, but that's part of what an executive leader does. It really is part of helping everyone connect the dots of the big picture. And please, I am not painting the picture at all that people go, oh my gosh, I thought we could do everything we wanted. No, but it is that moment where you go, hey, like we just planted 3 campuses in 18 months. About 20 months. But there was a cost to doing that. There's a cost to our team. There's a cost to our staff to do that, but also some opportunities that we aren't able to move forward with that are happening, that could happen, but we're actually choosing to allocate our resources this way. So I think part of staying in front of Pastor Rob is spending time with him, asking him leading questions, getting what's in his heart, and then just putting a practical plan down on paper, saying we can do this, but it could mean this.
It's super important for an executive leader or a department leader or campus pastor to know what the initiatives are that are in your lead pastor's heart and make sure that they're moving forward, that the lead pastor doesn't feel like he's babysitting you. And it's honestly the worst feeling, and it does happen. You know, I remember closing out the last year, Pastor Up called as he's getting ready for 2024 vision message. Usually he'll give an update of all the things we did last year. And he's like, hey, as I'm thinking through it, in 2023, a part of Vision was launching Spanish translation, and I'm getting ready to give the update, realizing we didn't do it. And man, that's a tough phone call to, you like just receive and you own it. And by the way, here's just a separate thing. Get ready as an executive leader to take all the blame and let the credit flow through you. So take it as a leader. Just say, hey, that's on me because that's the area I oversee. That's my bad. But also when there's something great that happens, we don't watch the opener, at this conference and as an executive pastor go, Pastor Rob, you see that? That was me, It had nothing to do with me, but to lean over to Pastor Rob and say, actually, one of our campus pastors, Pastor Anthony, made that video. And that's not even his job. He made the video for that opener, and you share nuggets like that. So that was just a side note. I forget what I was talking about before that. Spanish translation. Drop the ball. So that's not getting ahead of the vision. That's like being way behind and forgetting the vision. And it happens at times. There's so much, and we're moving so fast that sometimes we forget, like, oh yeah, you did say that. And nobody, and I don't mean this because things happen and we just didn't get there, but it was like, Pastor Rob, we're going to get on it. And so by Easter this year, 2024, we launched Spanish translation and looking to expand that across the house as well. I think staying ahead of the vision is super important. The worst thing that happens by staying ahead, we tried, Pastor Rob was kind of expressing some ideas about expansion. So we had this idea to film a video and this concept and be able to unveil it both online, social media, here at conference. And we started going down the road because we're trying to stay ahead of this vision. And, we had a couple meetings, conversations, had a little document about how we're going to talk about expansion and what is the vision, only to then get kind of a regroup with Pastor Rob and go, I don't know if he's not ready to do that. And so the worst thing that happens is this feeling of like, I was so on top of it. And not all of that is a throwaway. We can actually come back to that idea later when it is the right time, if it becomes the right time. And so hopefully that makes sense. I'd love to transition to this question or this idea between how we interact with each other. Because we're all best friends, right? Like, we're right? No? Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
No, we love each other, and God's gifted us differently. And the way Pastor Rob has asked me to serve in the role that I serve in, there's a reason, with my gifting and wiring, and also certain deficiencies, that Pastor Rob asked Pastor Chris to sit in his role, and for Steve to sit in his role. And so how we interact with each other and how the staff see and experience us interacting with each other really matters. And then we'd love to just kind of close this session talking about how we interact with our lead pastor, which we've given a couple of examples, and then go to Q&A. But it's this idea of intensity or urgency and also grace. And if we can balance being super full of grace towards each other, because sometimes the ministries want to run or change or go for it when that's not going to be in the best interest financially or operations, or we can't do that, or insurance said this or legal said this, and you're like, well, forget legal, and it's like you can't do that. So how do we work with each other with urgency but also giving grace towards each other? If you want to share any examples, it's all good.
Yeah.
Usually it's my fault, so.
No. No, not at all. No, I think it's with a lot of compassion towards each other and a lot of respect towards each other's giftings. Kirk and I operate very differently because our jobs operate differently, because we're gifted differently, and that is going to cause friction from time to time. It just is. And Kirk and I are very quick to sit down with each other and say, that didn't go like I thought it was going to go, or I completely forgot to communicate this to you. Just case in point, to be really honest, I read a Slack before I came up here. Kirk had sent me a Slack on Friday, and I just read it, and about something I had not communicated to him that didn't even dawn on me that I should communicate. So Kirk and I will have a short conversation after the session for me to say, I'm sorry.
Let's just do it now.
We should just do it now. No.
This is healing.
Let's not. But there's just a lot of grace with each other. There's a lot of making room for each other, because Kirk wants to do everything, and I mean this in a complimentary way. He wants to do it with fast and a sense of urgency. I'm a slower, process-oriented guy. I don't want to make any mistakes. I want us to go very slow. I want us to plot it. And at times he can get a little ahead of me. At times I can slow him down a little bit. We might get a little annoyed at each other, but then we always come back. We meet on we have a weekly calendar meet. We probably actually do it twice a month. Things happen, it gets canceled. And I'd say half of that meeting really is us just connecting. You good? Am I good? Where we at with each other? We all good? And I'm not saying that like it's like Lord of the Flies, nothing like that, but just making sure that we're good with each other relationally, because if we're not unified, the rest of the staff is going to feel that. What's the old saying? I'm just thinking about it. I'm going to butcher this, but if it's a mist in the pulpit, it's a fog in the congregation, or it's an old person saying, never mind, it doesn't matter. But if we're struggling, everyone else is going to struggle as well. And unity is one of our core values of the church, and so it's just paramount that the two of us specifically, but then Steve, obviously you are too, but just not him being here on site it just makes it a little less.
Great.
It's great? Okay. No, we just have the chance to interact with each other more often than not. And I think more often than not, it's even like when I'm sitting in my office and I don't understand something, I go, give him the most charitable explanation in your mind. Don't go for the, what's he thinking? And he does the same for me, and then we keep moving forward.
Oh, yeah. Another example of how this is how we interact with Pastor Rob a little bit, but if I'm interacting with Pastor Rob and he's like, let's go, let's do this. Urgency is not just because I want to do it now. It's usually because I'm trying to interpret what's in Pastor Rob's heart, and he may want to do it now. And he like, you have a conversation like, or it shouldn't be like that. We should change that. And so then I carry that sometimes into our conversations or interactions. But they also will meet with Pastor Rob. And not that he's having two separate conversations. It's both our true intention that he's like, let's not do it if we don't have the money. let's not do it if we don't have the right team. Let's not do it. And so there is this urgency in Pastor Rob and this speed that he wants to run at, but in wisdom. And so I really view Steve Chaney as this great man of wisdom and how you kind of approach this topic. Anything you'd like to add?
Sure. Well, first of all, quite a few times, especially in the financial world, I get a lot of pastors who don't know how to connect all the dots, but I do that pretty easily. Obviously, that's what I do, and I'm not putting them down. It's just like I come off sometimes like, hey, that's not the way it works, or this is the way it works. So sometimes I'll have conversations with Kirk, and I'll just say that as an example. You offered that we could do that.
Oh, yeah, please.
And sometimes I'll call Kirk up after a meeting. I'll go, I don't like the way that came off. Because I don't want to even let the Bible talks about don't letting the sun set, right? Like don't let another day go by before, I just want to clear the air. Even though I didn't mean anything negative by it, but it might not have come off well. And the reason why is because I want to be in 100% unity with him. Absolutely, in everything. And then just go through it. Like, let's just go through that again. Let's just talk through that again. Here recently, went to lunch. And I came back, and I was like, as I was coming back to lunch, I'm like, I'm going right to Kirk's office. And I was just like, I just didn't like the way that came off. And I apologize for that. Just be quick to clear the air. Because there's this great book, and I don't know if you've ever been able to read it, but Rob Kelly wrote a book called Speed of Unity. If you haven't read that book, you should read it. As a matter of fact, you should leave here with a copy for every staff person or every team member in your firm or in your organization. I actually did that. My entire leadership.
These are churches, Steve. They're not firms.
Yeah, they're firms. So, like, these are churches. So, like, I had my entire lead team and my entire staff read that book. And I would just tell you, it's an amazing book. It talks about how to walk, run, and then be in agreement, sort of in unity. And then Christ prayed over us, prayed and said, let them be in unity as we are, so there'd be nothing impossible, right? And just to let you know, in 2 years, my firm doubled after we read that book and we started acting in this way. And that's an amazing thing. And I'll just tell you, that's what's here. And I just want to make sure I honor that, right, in every relationship. So if I feel something, I'm going to be quick about it. And I'm just going to say, because I'm not going to be perfect, and I'm also going to talk about a very technical topic that sometimes can come off in a wrong way. Right? So just that unity that we want to be about. And then that's why this church has grown so much. Because Pastor Rob leads from that. So highly recommend you read that book.
I think just really practically, like how I interact with Pastor Rob. Obviously, we have a great relationship, but we don't sit down on a weekly basis. We don't sit down on a monthly basis. I'll bet you, as far as a one-on-one goes, it's probably 6 to 8 times a year that we actually sit down. But we do a shockingly high amount of business, church business on phones, on text messages. Like, he is a texting machine. And so what I've realized, and what I've realized is because he's asked for it, is just bulleted, like, give me once a week, twice a week, just give me the bullets of the big things. What are you working on? But B, what do I need to know? And he just doesn't ever want to be surprised. If he's surprised, those are the times he gets frustrated with the team. And so we all try and get ahead of that by just texting him. Here are the 3 big things I'm working on. Here's a potential problem. And like Steve, we were talking about this beforehand, and Steve said a lot of times he'll even put in the text, I don't need you to do anything about this. This is just an FYI. Just need you to know this is going on. We are on it. We're solving this problem. Here's probably how it's going to be solved. And 9 times out of 10, it's a thumbs up response. Pretty simple.
I think just really focusing right before we go to Q&A and hopefully, what time is this done? I'm so sorry, dearly. 3:45. Okay, we got 30 minutes. So just kind of maybe final kind of walkthrough is how are your interactions with Pastor Rob? Like, how do you relate with him? And also specifically, like, what is he expecting? Like, how much is he saying, that's my call, that's my decision? Or, no, that's, I feel the delegated task at times, responsibility, but also it's, I think it's surprising to a lot of people at a church like ours, the authority that he really does delegate. It's like, go for it. He just wants to champion. And so, Steve, what are your interactions like with Pastor Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. there's a couple things I've learned greatly from him. I've served a lot of Assemblies of God churches. A lot of Assembly of God churches lead their organizations by really the board, right? It's traditional board of directors, whatever you want to call them. And Pastor Rob really educated me on how we work here in the interaction with him. He'll be like, no, that's a tactical decision. We're the tactical. We do that. Board makes policy. We'll make that decision. And so he's really empowered me to say, like, no, just go do that. That's a great idea. Let's just go do it. The other thing that I do with him a lot is because when you deal with finances, you deal with a lot of like campus pastors, the lead team, this team, the board of trustees that we have. They'll talk to you about finances. And here in my mind, now this might sound weird to you, but here's how much I take this seriously, is even in a conversation, let's say it's between me and a campus pastor, I believe that Rob is standing right next to me. So I will answer that question as if Rob is standing right there. I will speak on his behalf. Like when I'm talking and I'm in other leadership areas, I've always representing Rob, right? So that's my interaction with him, to always make sure that I'm empowering what he would want to be empowered, how he would respond to that question. Because so like he's sort of the head, Chris is, or he's the heart, Chris is the head, and I'm sort of the hands. I'm sort of saying, like, I don't want to help lead this organization with a closed hand all the time, right? I don't want to be the CF no, but I want to be the CFKNOW no, right? I want people to know what financial matters mean. And so I'm to empower people to do that and to make sure that we can lead with an open hand versus it's always a closed hand, right? It's like, oh God, we got to go talk to the bookkeeper, and then they're going to be so negative about it. It's like, no, that's just a horrible way to, nobody wants to work with that, right? That's not like executive leadership. And so that's just how I do it. I interact with Rob, and we have a great relationship. The other things I'll do is like what Chris was saying, is I'll just give him a heads up. I'll just say like, hey, you don't need to do anything about this, but this is what you need to know. And again, the 4 R's that we talked about. And that's just how I interact with them. So
it's amazing. And some of you guys, you don't need to know this, but it's fun saying Steve Chaney won Innovative CPA of the Year by CPA.com, and a huge organization that just affirms accountants. And so that's a huge celebration. And yeah, it's awesome. So the systems that Chaney and Associates have, I'm doing a little ad. We actually are doing a little sponsorship interview later, but it's amazing. We use what's called Divvy. It's an organization that helps use, like, you can use church cards and helps you track your receipts and all that, accounting. And Divvy was super close to going bankrupt during COVID because everybody stopped spending. And they told him right before they sold for over $2 billion, they told Steve, if it hadn't been for you sending 14,000 churches, helping them get their PPP applications and transferring and using Divvy, we would have been bankrupt and not been able to. So it's just amazing. Sorry, that's just a shout out. You're not going to say that stuff. I just think it's so Mafia Steve, man. It's amazing. I think about this, interacting with Pastor Rob. I think about how does he want me to communicate with him? He gives great empowerment, great delegation. I've got the opportunity to lead while he's away, but what does he want to know? Here's an example we had at our Shakopee campus, one of our larger campuses, just a couple weeks ago. The audio failed, so services are getting close. Pastor Zeus is back there. What's up? Nico, good to see you. They're both Shakopee. So Zeus is on vacation. I get a call from the associate campus pastor. The audio rig is broken. Will not work, cannot play video, not going to happen. It's an emergency. Service is in 30 minutes. And so I was not scheduled to be at that campus, just start driving over and preparing in my head, like I'm going to preach live, and you just are figuring that all, just making it work. And about 14 times I'm thinking, like, I got to let Pastor Rob know. And Pastor Rob was out of town at that time. I got to let Pastor Rob know this is happening, and then it would be overridden by the next problem or the next thing, or just getting my head straight. Church went great. Went home, took a nap, celebrating what the Lord did. Just awesome. Then had a men's event, and then Monday was back-to-back meetings. We do Ministry Mondays at our central building. All of our staff are there. We can kind of explain that later. But Monday afternoon, Pastor Rob goes, did one of our campuses not have sound at all yesterday? And sends it to me and Chris. And it was like, Oh, dude, that's my bad. Like, you definitely should have known that immediately, and it ended up all being good. But as an executive leader, you need to know what your pastor wants to know and communicate in a way. Speak his language or her language. Speak their language. Don't just expect them to speak your language. And so that's what I'm still growing in. That's just an example. And then also, you have to be great. Pastor Davey is our broadcast campus pastor, and this is another position in our organization that you got to be great at. When Pastor Rob's not in the room, lead like you were asked to lead, like you were hired for a reason. Go for it. Step into it. That's why you're here. And when your lead pastor walks in the room, when Pastor Rob is in the room, he doesn't want to strip you of all of that, what he's asked you to do. But at the same time, what I always try to do, Pastor Davey does a great job, is deferring. He's in the room. Hey, you're here. Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to see? Anything you want to add? Like, and you're always playing this kind of balance or this tiptoe game, not in a I'm nervous way, but just in an honoring way. Like, dude, he's here. I'm not here because, this isn't all great because I'm so great. And like, he should take note, while he's here, I'm going to really show off on this platform moment. It's like, no, Pastor Rob, like, you're the leader. And just, our team loves when Pastor Rob is in the room. And I think, as an executive leader, you have the opportunity to make that the feeling in the organization, or to really make that not the feeling. That the lead pastor is somebody to be fearful of, or scared, or nervous, or disempowering. And so I think the high-level leaders are great at deferring and making the entire organization feel like, dude, aren't you so happy that our lead pastor's here at this campus or in this environment, or walking into this meeting unannounced? Like, we've been expecting you. We've been waiting for you. We're pumped that you're here. The whole agenda, we're pausing it. What do you have to say? What do you want to add? And the more leaders that you can have in your organization that are like that, I just think the healthier culture you're going to have. So we'd love to transition now. Pastor Dare Lee, come on up and help. You can help host Q&A or run a mic.
I'm just going to run a mic. So if you have a question for any of our three, I saw a hand already. He's ready to go. I'll just be running mics. So I'll keep eyes for hands up in the room, and I'll run around. I'll get my workout in today.
Let's go, Zach.
What's up? So when you're leading different leaders, and those leaders are high capacity leaders, they'll oftentimes have passions that are outside the organization. And so how do you, at River Valley, what would be the approach to responding to them, especially this generation? A lot of millennials, younger millennials or Generation Z are having the side hustles, not even just for the financial component, but actual passion. So how do you go about that here?
Yeah. We encourage it. So Pastor Rob, he teaches every person on your staff should have a side hustle. Like, he has said that from the platform to our staff before, and then it's just up to us to figure out how to help them manage that. How do we get them to make sure that aligns with the vision, so it's not competing with the vision of the organization, or is it something completely different? And we do put some boundaries around it, but absolutely we definitely want to give people the freedom to do that. Kirk and Pastor Logan actually challenged our thinking quite a bit in January on this, and just saying, hey, a rising tide raises all boats. So let's let people have a whole lot more freedom in how they're doing social media and the different things they might want to do with social media. And that was a little bit of a foreign thought to me, but the more we talked about it, the more it made sense. And we just kind of, I wouldn't say we opened the floodgates, but we certainly opened it up for people to do more.
So one thing I would also add to that is that you're actually looking at what we call here a scorecard, like financially, or some type of matrix that you're evaluating somebody by. Because for in my example, I will my management team, I will sometimes highly question in my mind, well, why aren't you here Saturday working? Or why are you coming in at 9:30? Or why are you doing this or doing that? Because that's how I was raised back to work. But they have a different sort of not work ethic to the point that they're not working. But then I have matrix that I evaluate them by. And when they're meeting their matrix and exceeding the matrix, then I have to go, well, I wouldn't have done it that way, but guess what? There's success. It's working, right? But you have to be able to measure it, and you have to sort of manage by the numbers. And if you're not managing by the numbers eventually, because as numbers, like let's just talk about money is concerned, when there's money problems, you don't have a money problem. There's another problem, right? People are not effectively growing the kingdom of God in a church to then have ultimately people discipled to then teach them how to tithe. But tithing is sort of like a lagging indicator, right? And so you gotta measure those metrics, and you gotta evaluate that. And I will tell you, just as a generational thing, the way I was raised, you just work all the time. That is not the case nowadays. But they're working all the time, but in just different areas, right? That's the side hustle that he's talking about.
I think also just, we try to keep it out in the open. So if there's something that a staff member is working on, if it feels like secretive, or if it feels like it's like a surprise to everybody, or like you get a comment from congregation like, hey, so-and-so youth pastor was pressure washing sidewalks on Wednesday, morning. Like is that, it's like, oh, I didn't, maybe they should have been at work and not pressure washing. Like, oh, they have a business. They have oh, that's a different thing. So just it's out in the open. And then also the legality and also mutual shared interest. If a kid's pastor's like, I want to write a kid's book, or I want to do a kid's podcast, or I want to, but they're like, I want to own it. Well, you're hired as a kids pastor, and you're using the church laptop, and you're using the podcast studio, and there has to be this mutual, like one of our staff values is we want everybody there to be a win-win-win. And so if there's a way that we can approve those things that are really ministry things that are going to benefit our church, we would love for those things to be on like through the inside of the organization rather than a separate outside thing. So and they can still have a benefit. Pastor Rob shares a story. He's like I have this dream like to one day be at a conference like this, and somebody comes up and doesn't recognize Pastor Rob, but asks him to take a picture of another staff member and the guests, like, hey, can I get a picture with so-and-so? And Pastor Rob's like, I want to be the lead pastor that has the humility to take the picture and not really care. Like, why aren't they taking my picture? Why aren't they asking me? Like, do they know? And so I think that comes with just having a humble lead pastor. So great question.
You all mentioned staying ahead of the vision and naming every dollar and controls. What are some systems in terms of controls that you all have in place that help you all to get that, on a practical level, that people on staff realize it affects them and their behaviors?
Well, Steve can share financially. I'll just say we instituted last year a staff covenant and a leaders covenant. So if you're going to work here, there's a certain way we expect you to live. As far as just morality, character, ethics, and just putting it clearly on paper. You can't describe everything, but you say like, hey, these are the non-negotiables. If you can't agree to this, then you're working at the wrong church. And we didn't have that for a long time, and that led to certain conversations of like awkward conversations of, is this okay? Is this not okay? Hey, we got to correct this. Hey, this is not, other pastors or other churches allow, well, we're not every other church. And so we have certain expectations. And so that's like a system that helps us just bring clarity and have less problems across the board. There's more examples like that. Training our staff is another example. We just did a mandatory reporting training for all of our pastors. A lot of our next gen pastors had to be there to learn from Child Protective Services of what is required of a pastor, what are the legalities, so that we don't have a problem later in not reporting something. And that was before some of the scandals, that Pastor Rob talked about. That's ongoing stuff that we're always trying to make sure that our staff is well trained. But there's a lot of areas that are in the finance world.
Yeah. So the first thing that we did, obviously, from the leadership, is the 10% of the tithe, right? So when I first came in here, we would always catch up at that at the end of the year, and because they have big spikes. And so what I started doing was accruing it every week, every Sunday, specifically for the end of the month. And so we just started setting that money aside. So we instituted a high level of fund accounting. It's not fun, F-U-N, it's F-U-N-D, fund. And we identified that our operations was spending some of our designated funds, and then we would catch up at the end of the year. So we stopped that immediately. And we just went to a process of creating boundaries, but not barriers. Everybody needed to know what their healthy boundaries were, but we didn't want the accounting system to be a barrier. Like, we wanted to let people lead. So we instituted the system called Divvy. It's now bill.com, is it? Bill, spend, and expense. It's an amazing system. You will literally never go over budget ever again. It will be 100% intentional if you go over budget. So that is 100%, because before I came in here, we had sort of 3 areas. We had a U.S. bank card that you could only max out twice a month. And then we let everybody use their personal cards. And then we allowed them, if that still didn't work, to invoice us from the vendor. Now we stopped all that. There's no personal reimbursements at all. You have to use the Divvy card to stay inside your budget. And if you accidentally spend something with your personal card, you have to return that product, and then you have to pay for it on your Divvy card as just a nice little gratitude to say you'll start to spend the church's finances in a healthy way, because it is clearly a luxury and a benefit to be able to spend the church's finances. It is not a right. And people feel like it's, though, like this is what Pastor Rob talked about today. If you heard it, he said it really quick. How do you spend the church's money when you go out to dinner versus when you pay for it on your own, right? So, and just let you know, I'll spend a lot more money of my own money than the church's money, because I get really sensitive about it. And I'm from California. If you come to Minnesota, then they get really cheap. Like, they bring it way down, so that's a bad joke. But but my Divvy card, like, my staff have to ask for every dollar they spend. Like, I want to know, right? And so that's the kind of systems we put in place. Then we put the financial scorecard. I built a whole Google dashboarding system that they can look up their finances. It updates every day. And then that's just what we've done. And then what we do is we hold to a budgeted perspective at a global level, the corporate. And so from an operations perspective, we separate all of the designated funds to where they go on an immediate basis, not at the end of the year. And then what we do is we save the 10% of tithe goes out. That's every month. And then 50% of salaries and 50% of tithes is for salaries and benefits. We keep our facility costs 25% or less of the budget, and the rest is for ministry. And we've been able to fund everything that way. And we caught up. So when I first came in here, we were way under budget by like $900,000 in our operating fund. Now, we had millions of dollars in the bank, but that was just when we did that fund accounting, that's what happened. And within about 20 months, we were able to flip that by about $2.5 million. And then we were able to we actually went up to $5.3 million of reserve. Coming from $900,000, that's $6.1 million swing. And the way we did that was just putting basic little systems in place. Our accounting software is $42 a month, unlimited users. Google's free, and Divvy's free. We do pay for Paycom. That's what we use for our payroll system. But I will tell you, like, I literally will run a church that has $100,000 a year budget, or one that has $50 million a year budget on the same software. It's the same product. So all these big systems out there that people are using are just really a waste of money. And you can actually build stuff yourself.
Bill.com, Divvy.
Oh, yeah. We use a program called Xero, Xero. And if you want to, feel free to ask me after this, and I can tell you all about it.
So I have I'm right over here. Hello.
Hello.
Sorry. If the 3 of you are working on a project together and you're following the vision, but you have 3 very different ways to go about it, how do you make a decision?
Who?
Like, yeah. Well, I'm actually trying to think of a time when that's happened where we've just been so far apart we couldn't get to an agreement. It really does boil down to us spending time together and making sure our incentives to work together are all aligned. And so it's not me with my, like, I oversee the finance and Kirk oversees the ministry, and and therefore I'm the one who control the money, so I'm going to win. No, we really don't operate like that. We really do try and get with each other. Now, there have been times when it's similar to what we've said to Pastor Rob, like, hey, we can do that, but we can't do this then. There are some trade-off conversations, but by and large, what we try and do on the operations side is operate as a horizontal that's supporting the verticals of the ministry. And so if someone has to win, it's typically going to be the ministry they're going to take the lead, and our job is to figure out how to support that.
Certain conversations that have been like that, that have resulted in either change or not changing. One was how we did our allotments financially, and this is a great example of how great the Divvy tool is. We gave monthly allotments, and at the end of every month, we had multiple staff members reaching out to Carla, who's kind of our in-house controller, if you will, releasing funds. They had it in their budget, but their monthly allotment was running out. And so we had a lot of employees requesting more funds, which became frustrating for Carla and frustrating for the employees of like, it feels like you're coming to mom or dad for more spending money. And so we actually, through a lot of conversation and agreement, disagreement, and where we can land to now quarterly allotment. And I say this in faith, believing that it's going to work by the end of the year. But being more restrictive is not always better, and it's not always necessarily better stewardship. Steve allowed for us, and Pastor Chris allowed for us to be less restrictive, give a quarterly allotment, and for us locally in the ministry world and our department leads, and Pastor Dara Lee does a lot of help and work with this as well. We do more of the legwork and updates monthly to make sure our eyes are on the spending and how our ministry leaders doing, so that it's not the headache for finance to always be the ones like, if we get to the end of the year and overspend. No, if we get to the end of the year and overspend, I want to feel the weight of responsibility for that. So have to step up our game locally in ministries to make sure that the less restriction, it doesn't come back and bite us. Another change that we made was with our database. We're in this process of our giving and finance going through Rock and updating our ministry tools and how we minister in our database. We're going to go towards planning centers. So that's a huge shift for us. Data migration, all that, not enough time. But there's another idea that I was really kind of fighting for and believed in, and I said the statement, whose call is it? Because I was getting roadblocked by Chris. And I was like, whose decision is it? And I knew it was more in his world than it was in my world, but I just wanted to hear him say, it's my decision. And he goes like really quietly and humble, just goes, you can do it if you want. And I was like, I'm not doing it. It's like the worst, just like, all right. And so that's a good example of, we've made certain changes through a lot of robust conversations. Sometimes it gets intense and there's grace given. And then we've put the pause on certain ideas because maybe we're not on the right page, or it's just the Lord shows up in those conversations through these leaders that's like, you got to slow down, okay? We don't have to do every new idea under the sun, so.
Well, and the other thing too is, I talked about this at the beginning, is getting that right information to that person. Most organizations drive their car from the rear view mirror or the side mirrors. Very rarely do people have the right information to sort of look ahead and get ahead of it. And so what happens in my role, just to let you know, is both of them they'll do a project or something, whether it be ministry, whether it be the kids' branding remodel, or whether it be the build out of the new central. And they'll be like, hey, we're going to go over budget here. And I'm like, and in my world, well, no, that's what you told me you needed, right? And then we start to talk, and we'll say, okay, well, we could take money from here over to there. We could push money over here. So now I'm trying to get more information, right, to get that up to speed. Versus, again, not be that CFO, but also be the person who can help support getting this done, because it has to get done. But I also have conversations that I have with Pastor Rob. I have conversations that I have with the treasurer. I have other conversations with other leaders in the organization, and they have just as much other initiatives that they need to do. But it's my job to sort of help manage it all and balance it. So that's sort of what we do. It's really a healthy thing. to come into play. Because when I first came in here in this organization, we talked about that the operation was down $900,000. There's a reason why, because we decided to build out 3 and remodel 3 campuses, and there wasn't funding for it. So the financial officer did not properly do the analysis needed to say, can we raise the money? Should we borrow the money? And it was underfunded. That's why operations was overspending. It wasn't just because they spent too much on going out to eat. It was capital improvements. So those kind of things go south fast. Yeah. And you got to be able to change it quickly and be able to be in tune, right? And that unity helps.
All right, we got about 5 minutes left. Nope, 3 minutes left. We have one last final question real quick right here.
We'll hang out after as well if there's more questions. It's all good.
My question had more to do with organizational and maybe funding that way. For your campus pastors and your campuses, say you have a department like your children's department, do they report more towards the campus pastor or more towards a senior children's ministry? And then funding as well. Does the campus pastor cover the funding for all the departments, or is it all done through the children's funding?
Great question. There, we talk about direct and dotted lines. Direct line is up to the campus pastor at the campus. Dotted line would be to the central lead kids pastor in that example. On the budget side, you can kind of flip it a little bit in that the central leader, the lead kids pastor, would be the one to help set what is the kids budget across the house and how do we divvy that out to each campus throughout the year. Obviously, with the input of those kids leaders at the campus and as well as campus pastors. Does that make sense? Awesome.
Let me just the only thing I would add to that is we also don't hire campus pastors who want to do their own thing. They're so aligned to what the vision of the church is. They're not saying, well, no, you don't understand. In my community, kids ministry happens like this. Like, we just don't have those conversations because they know, no, the church is going in this way. And so even though the dotted line might be to the central kids pastor and then the campus pastor, they're making sure they're aligned as well.
And the 3 lead campus pastors, a part of their job description is like a liaison role. So one of our lead campus pastors is a liaison to discipleship. One is to next gen and one is to creative. So there's always a campus pastor representation or representative, not just one of those 3, but they might select other campuses to participate in certain creative decisions or conversations or next gen or discipleship. So you try to do it shared and collaborative as much as possible. Thank you guys so much for coming to conference and coming to this breakout. Hopefully it's been helpful. Hey, just before we close, we'd love to close in prayer if that's okay. I know it's like time to go. I love that our CFO is a spiritual leader. And Steve, would you just pray over all these churches that are represented in the room and as we close?
Yes, Father, we just thank you again for everyone who has decided to be involved in growing your kingdom. Lord, we ask that your Spirit would speak and guide to us every day. Lord, as you direct our steps and our paths, Lord, that we would know how to hear your voice and your guidance. Bless these people in this group, and as they go back to their churches, Lord, let the buy-in be strong for you, Father, as your Spirit leads. In your name we pray, amen.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to Talking Church on YouTube. If you like this podcast, make sure to click the like button below so more people can find this episode. And if you're not yet subscribed, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We're releasing a video every week with new topics related to church and ministry. So join us as we continue to talk church.